If the man you love gets down on one knee and asks you to marry him, what would you do? Would you cry tears of happiness? Say yes without hesitation? As I stood there, looking at the man who was supposed to be my future, I felt nothing but disgust. Because just a week ago, I discovered he was only using me for money. Daniel Hayes had been my boyfriend for nearly 3 years. He was the kind of man people dream about: tall, handsome, charming, with a smile that could melt anyone's heart. A successful entrepreneur, always talking about his next big business deal, always making me feel like we were building something together. I was in love with him, and I believed, without a doubt, that he loved me too. Friends envied me. Colleagues congratulated me. "Emily, you're so lucky. You have the dream boyfriend." And I believed it. We traveled together, dined at the finest restaurants, planned for a future where we'd buy a beautiful apartment in the heart of the city. Daniel always told me, "I want to build a life with you." It sounded like something out of a fairy tale. I thought I had it all. Until the night I accidentally opened his laptop and discovered that our entire relationship was built on a lie. It happened completely by accident. Daniel had left his laptop at my apartment one evening. He had stepped out to take a phone call, and I wasn't trying to snoop. I really wasn't. But the screen was still open, and a new email notification popped up. Subject: Wedding Plan Updates. It caught my eye. My heart skipped a beat. Was he planning a proposal? Was he secretly setting up the perfect engagement? Curiosity got the best of me. I clicked the email, and what I saw made my stomach drop. It wasn't from a jeweler. It wasn't from a wedding planner. It was from his ex-girlfriend. And the message was not about planning a future with me. It was about using me. "Daniel, are you sure she won't suspect anything? Once the money is secured, we can disappear and start fresh. I still can't believe she hasn't figured it out. You always had a way with women. Just make sure you lock in that joint account before the wedding. We don't want any surprises." I felt sick. I read the email over and over again, hoping I had misunderstood, that there was some logical explanation. But no, it was clear as day. Daniel wasn't planning a proposal because he loved me. He was planning it because I was his ticket out of financial ruin. I closed the laptop and sat in silence. For a long time, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All those late-night talks about our future, all those moments I thought were real, all of it had been a lie. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But instead, I took a deep breath and made a decision. Daniel thought he was in control. He thought he could manipulate me, that I'd fall for his charming words and blind devotion. But he was wrong, because now I knew the truth. And if he wanted to play games, then I was going to make sure he lost everything. I could have confronted him that night. I could have screamed, demanded answers, thrown my wine glass at his lying, smug face, but that would have been too easy for him. No, Daniel didn't deserve a simple breakup. He deserved to have his world crumble the same way he had planned to destroy mine. So I smiled. I kissed him. I let him think everything was normal, and I started planning his downfall. For the next week, I played my role flawlessly. When Daniel came over the night after I saw the email, I greeted him with a kiss and a glass of wine. He had no idea that my hands had been shaking, not from nerves, but from the sheer effort it took not to claw his face off. He wrapped his arms around me. "I missed you today." Liar. "I missed you too," I whispered. I was disgusted by him, but I forced myself to act normal, to pretend I was still the same clueless girlfriend he had been stringing along for 3 years. If I wanted to take him down, I needed to be smart, because Daniel thought he was in control, and I was going to make sure he never saw the storm coming. The next step was gathering proof. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make sure he had nowhere left to run. So I hired a private investigator. A friend of mine, Ava, had a cousin who worked in cybersecurity. Within 2 days, she got access to Daniel's secret financial records. And what we found? It was so much worse than I had imagined. Daniel was completely broke. He had tens of thousands of dollars in debt from failed business deals. He had multiple credit cards maxed out. And the best part? I wasn't the only woman he had scammed. He had done this before, twice. Two other women, both successful, both independent, both completely unaware that they had been nothing more than walking ATMs to him. One of them, Julia, had even lent him money before she realized what he was. By the time she cut him off, he had drained her for nearly $50,000. The second woman, Claire, had been luckier. She had found out early, but Daniel had already stolen jewelry and electronics from her before disappearing. And now, I was his next target. Only this time, he picked the wrong woman. Once I had enough information, it was time to turn the tables. Daniel had been pushing hard for us to open a joint bank account. Of course, he framed it romantically. "It just makes sense, babe. We're going to be married soon. We should be sharing everything." Sharing? He meant stealing. I pretended to hesitate, biting my lip like I was unsure. "I don't know. It's a big step." Daniel, ever the manipulator, leaned in and kissed me. "Trust me," he whispered. "It'll bring us even closer." I wanted to laugh in his face. Instead, I sighed. "Okay, let's do it." His eyes lit up. Hook, line, and sinker. The night before our supposed bank meeting, Daniel took me out to dinner. A high-end restaurant, candlelit, violinists playing in the background. Halfway through dessert, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. My heart should have fluttered. Instead, all I felt was cold rage. He got down on one knee. The entire restaurant fell silent. "Emily Carter," he said, voice dripping with false sincerity. "You are the love of my life. Will you marry me?" People around us gasped, clapped, wiped away tears. I saw the smug look in his eyes. He thought he had won. He thought I was his. I smiled sweetly, pretending my hands were shaking from excitement instead of fury. "Yes," I whispered. The restaurant erupted into cheers. Daniel slid the ring onto my finger. I let him kiss me, but inside, I was already counting down the days. Because soon, he would learn the hard way that he had just proposed to his worst nightmare. Daniel thought he had won. He thought I was his fiancée, his future wife, his next victim. What he didn't know was that while he was busy planning to steal my money, I was planning to ruin his life. 2 days after the proposal, I met Daniel at the bank. He was all smiles, practically beaming with excitement. I wondered if he was picturing the moment he'd drain the account, disappearing with everything he could take. I played my part perfectly. I let him talk about how this was the first step to building a future together. I acted shy but excited when he placed his hand over mine and whispered, "This is us becoming a real team, babe." But the moment we left the bank, I had already secured my escape route. I had spoken with the bank manager the night before. The account had strict security measures that Daniel didn't know about. If he so much as tried to move a large amount of money, I would be immediately notified, and the transaction would be blocked. I was letting him think he had access to my money, when in reality, he had access to nothing. While Daniel was busy celebrating his success, I had already reached out to Julia and Claire, the two women he had scammed before me. It didn't take much convincing. Julia was furious when she found out Daniel was up to his old tricks again. She had been too embarrassed to go after him legally before, but now she was ready for revenge. Claire had been lucky enough to escape without losing money, but she was eager to see Daniel finally pay for what he did. We gathered everything: bank records, stolen funds, text messages, and emails. And then we filed a report. Daniel didn't just owe money. What he had done, using fake promises of marriage and love to financially exploit women, was fraud. And soon, the law was going to catch up to him. Daniel was planning a big engagement party, his way of showing off to the world that he had landed a successful woman. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. Instead, it would be the night everything fell apart. I had the venue booked, the invitations sent, and the guests confirmed. Among those guests, the women he had scammed, and a few reporters. If Daniel wanted a grand performance, I was going to give him one. The engagement party was flawless. A beautiful rooftop setting, champagne glasses clinking, guests mingling, music playing softly in the background. Daniel was in his element, laughing, charming, acting like he was the king of the world. He had no idea that he was standing on a trap ready to snap shut. When it was time for the speeches, Daniel pulled me into his arms, beaming at the crowd. Everyone, I just want to say how lucky I am to have found Emily. She is the most incredible woman in the world. People clapped, cameras flashed. I smiled up at him sweetly, playing my final role. That's so sweet, Daniel, I said. But before we continue, I think it's only fair that we show everyone the real you. I gestured to the giant projector screen behind us. Daniel frowned. What? And then, the screen lit up. The crowd fell silent as email after email flashed across the screen. Messages between Daniel and his ex, his plans to steal my money, his fake love letters to other women. Then, video testimonies from Julia and Claire appeared. Each woman told their own horror story about how Daniel had lied, manipulated, and stolen from them. By the time it ended, you could hear a pin drop. Daniel's face went pale. Someone in the crowd murmured, "Oh my God!" Then a sharp voice cut through the silence. "That's him!" I turned. It was two police officers stepping forward. "Daniel Hayes," one of them announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, financial exploitation, and theft." Daniel stumbled back, shaking his head. No, this is a mistake." The officers grabbed him before he could run. People started whispering. The cameras started flashing faster. I watched as Daniel was handcuffed right in front of me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. As they dragged him away, Daniel turned to look at me, eyes filled with fury. "You set me up," he snarled. "You think you've won? You'll regret this, Emily." I smiled. "No, Daniel," I said calmly. "I think you're the one who's going to regret this." The doors slammed shut behind him. And just like that, Daniel was gone. When the doors slammed shut behind Daniel, taking him away in handcuffs, I finally took my first deep breath in weeks. It was over. The lies, the manipulation. The man who had spent years pretending to love me while plotting to steal everything I had. Gone. The engagement party that was supposed to be his victory had become his greatest humiliation. But even though I had won, the aftermath of his betrayal wasn't as easy to walk away from. The morning after the party, I woke up to a flood of messages. Some were from friends and coworkers, all saying the same thing. "Oh my God, Emily, I had no idea. Are you okay? I can't believe Daniel was such a scumbag. You deserved better. You're a damn genius for taking him down like that." But the ones that stood out the most, the messages from other women, women I didn't even know, women Daniel had tried to scam before. "I saw the news. He did the same thing to me a few years ago. I lost $20,000 before I realized what he was. Thank you for exposing him. I was about to invest in one of his business deals. You saved me from making the worst mistake of my life. Emily, you don't know me, but what you did. You're a hero. He won't hurt anyone else ever again." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a deep, undeniable sense of closure. Daniel wasn't just a liar. He was a predator. And now, he was finally paying the price. A week after his arrest, I met with Julia and Claire, the two women he had scammed before me. We had coffee in a quiet cafe, finally able to talk freely without Daniel's lies poisoning everything. "He's finished," Julia said, stirring her drink. "His lawyers are trying to negotiate, but with all the evidence we gave the police, he's looking at years in prison." Claire nodded. "And even if he gets out early, his name is ruined. No one in this city will ever trust him again." I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting that sink in. Daniel had spent his life charming, deceiving, and stealing. But now, he had nothing left to take. Despite winning, I wasn't as okay as I thought I'd be. I didn't miss Daniel. I missed the person I thought he was. I had spent 3 years believing he loved me, imagining a future with him. And now? I wasn't sure if I could ever trust someone again. I threw away the engagement ring. I deleted every picture of us together. But the scars he left? Those didn't fade overnight. For weeks, I avoided dating, avoided romantic movies, avoided anything that reminded me of how stupid I had been. But then, something unexpected happened. It started small. A stranger at my favorite bookstore, striking up a conversation about a novel we both reached for at the same time. A coworker offering to grab me coffee when I looked exhausted at work. A man I met at a charity event who asked about my passion for interior design instead of how much money I made. They weren't Daniel. And maybe that was a good thing. I wasn't ready to fall in love again. But I was ready to stop letting Daniel's betrayal define me. A month after his arrest, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. But the moment I saw the handwriting, I knew. It was from Daniel. I hesitated for a long time before opening it. Inside, the words were short, messy, like he had written them in a hurry. Emily, you ruined my life. I loved you, but you turned on me. I hope you're happy. One day, you'll regret this. I stared at the letter. And then? I laughed. Because for the first time in a long time, I realized something. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel anything for him at all. Daniel no longer had any power over me. And that? That was the greatest victory of all. It took me a long time to truly move on. I thought taking Daniel down would be the end of it. That once he was exposed, arrested, and ruined, I'd wake up feeling free. But the truth is, he left scars. Scars that didn't fade overnight. Trust didn't come easy anymore. Love didn't feel as magical as it once did. Every time I met someone new, there was always a voice in the back of my head whispering, "What if he's just like Daniel?" But despite everything, I refused to let one man's betrayal define the rest of my life. And slowly, little by little, I rebuilt myself. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects, pushing my creativity further than ever. And soon, I was offered a promotion, creative director at my firm. A position I had dreamed of for years, but never thought I'd get so soon. Turns out, cutting toxic people out of your life makes room for the things you actually deserve. I traveled. I reconnected with old friends. I started doing things for me, instead of constantly worrying about someone else. And it felt incredible. 6 months after Daniel's arrest, I was out with friends when I saw someone familiar at the cafe across the street. At first, I didn't recognize him, but then he turned his head, and my heart nearly stopped. Daniel. Except this wasn't the confident, charming man I used to know. He looked wrecked, disheveled, lost, like someone who had been chewed up and spit out by life. His eyes met mine for half a second, and I saw it. Shame. He knew exactly what he had lost. I half expected him to come over, to try and talk his way back into my life. But he didn't. He just looked away. And that's when I knew. I had won. A year later, I met someone new. It wasn't some fairy tale whirlwind romance. It wasn't full of grand gestures and sweet-talking lies. It was real. It was slow. It was built on respect, honesty, and trust. And the best part? He didn't want my money. He didn't care about what I could offer him financially. He just wanted me. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe in love again. Daniel thought he could use me, manipulate me, and leave me broken. But instead, his betrayal became the best thing that ever happened to me. Because without it, I never would have realized my own strength. I never would have learned how to stand up for myself. I never would have found the life, the happiness, that I actually deserved. And Daniel? He lost everything, while I finally had it all. If this were you, what would you have done? Would you have exposed Daniel like Emily did? Or would you have walked away quietly? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts.